Welcome to Speak of the Devils, the premier podcast for Sun Devil football. I'm Brad Denny with 3TV.
And I'm Joe Healy with DevilsDigest.com.
Holy hell, Joe, I think Cam Skattebo just picked up another Sun Devil first down.
My goodness. What a performance by Cam Skattebo, an all-timer up there with the absolute best individual offensive performances in the history of the program. And these are not exaggerations. These are statistical facts. And ASU needed every bit of it. It was a bit of a roller coaster there, but you know what? The end result is what it is. Winning is good. Devils are 2-0 with Mississippi State finally getting that first SEC win in the books for ASU. We'll see if maybe some more hexes and curses and voodoo can be broken this week. I was going to say weekend, but week in San Marcos, Texas. What I'm saying is we got a lot to look back and talk about, a lot to look forward to talking about. Devils are rolling. See if they can keep it up here week 3.
Yeah, winning is indeed good. But yeah, as you alluded to, that hex that's coming up, that's going to be a big one. That might be bigger than any SEC. It just needs more type stuff. But yeah, we got a lot to talk about, including Cam Skattebo's record-setting night. We're also going to look ahead and go behind Texas State lines with Bobcat insider Keff Ciardello a little bit later on in the show. Is a big one on tap. It is a non-conference road game against the G5, but it's a really good G5. But there's a lot of good positive momentum finally for the Sun Devil football program. So a lot to go on in this episode.
There you go. And you know what? If you're jonesing for another Sun Devil victory, you got to be jonesing for a new vehicle as well. Get that from Jones Auto Group. Of course, that needs to be your first call, your only call if you're in the market for a new vehicle or even just considering one. Jones has been servicing the state of Arizona and the Sun Devil community for more than 50 years with multiple locations across the state. It is a fact. Jones Auto Group was the original provider of vehicles to Sun Devil student athletes for NIL purposes. And it's your support that enables them to do that year after year. In addition to their unwavering support of Sun Devil athletics, Jones Auto Group also offers unique tax advantages due to their dealership locations. Those can possibly save you some big-time money. So you ask me, it doesn't get much better than that when shopping for a new vehicle. You're working with a fellow Sun Devil who will treat you like family and potentially set you up for some very unique and significant savings. So if you want to do that, and I encourage you that you do, contact Parker Jones, not just the owner and GM, but a third-generation Arizona State alum just like you, a diehard Sun Devil fan. Take down his cell phone number if you don't have it already. We've been talking about it for quite a while. 602-881-8998. Again, 602-881-8998. That's for Parker Jones, the owner and GM. You can browse their inventory of new and pre-owned vehicles at jonesautocenters.com. Jones Auto Group, Arizona's best since 1970.
So when you put your name in the record book multiple times, you're probably in a good position, Joe, to get some national and conference level awards. And that's exactly what happened with Cam Skattebo. Not just the AP National Player of the Week, but also the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Week.
Yeah, I mean, that was just unreal. And it was interesting how it came together, because prior to that last run that he had that put the game on ice, I mean, he was averaging like 8 yards a carry, creeping up on 200 yards with a long run of like 15, 16 yards. I mean, it was just dang near every single time he touched the ball. He was getting not just positive yardage, but we're talking 8 to 10 yards. You know, there are a lot of guys who can put together star-studded games of 200-plus rushing yards where they might have like an 85-yarder that really, tilts things in a positive direction. Obviously, it all adds up. But, man, when you got a guy that's just doing it snap after snap, carry after carry, someone who's certainly not the biggest guy out there, and he's leaner than he even was last year, but my goodness, is that physical transformation showing off, is his dedication showing off, and like we said, ASU needed every bit of it because that second half got a little dicey there, but just an outstanding game by Cam Skattebo and came close to breaking some ASU records and would have broken some records that stood for decades up until a guy like Eno Benjamin came around, so If it doesn't sink in, it should sink in now. I'm telling you, it's one of the absolute best offensive performances in the history of Sun Devil athletics.
Yeah, and so we'll certainly put it in greater context and dive a little bit more into it in our review. But yeah, it was just an incredible night, and yeah, just every time he hit a defender, if he was going to go down, it would be 3 yards beyond that point. He never went down at the point of contact. We've seen that attitude, that swagger that he has, and he was just really making the Bulldogs pay. and also racking up the yards and help the Sun Devils, most importantly, get that W. But he wasn't the only Sun Devil to get a conference level award, and this is pretty cool. I know the Pac-12 had like an offensive lineman or defensive lineman of the week, but the Big 12 has Beef of the Week, and that's going to defensive tackle C.J. Fight for not only having the beef, but getting in the end zone thanks to some pretty impressive agility.
Yeah, I mean, that was, yet again, just impressive performances by ASU's defensive linemen. Obviously, the second straight week with a defensive touchdown by a defensive lineman after Justin Watley did what he did in week 1. I mean, that was a very nimble play. That entire sequence of that particular play, it was one of those moments where I'm like, snap, on that PAT, it's like, snap the ball, get this, like, in the stadium, it looked like there's no way they're going to, keep that ruling. It just looked like the quarterback's knee was down.
Yeah.
Let's go. And then just the fancy footwork there by Fight to stay in bounds, to get in the end zone, because it's one of those plays you see it happen. You're like, all right, well, they're just like extracurricular activity. It's going to come back. It's not going to be a touchdown. They're like, well, wait, they're signaling it a touchdown. It's like, well, wait, they're not reviewing it.
Kick team's going out there.
All right, okay, this is happening. So, yeah, and outstanding play. And again, as the game unfolded, when that happened, things looked to be, in no sort of peril. But with the run that Mississippi State made in, that last half of the third quarter and into the fourth quarter, every bit was necessary. So that play was not just entertaining, not just nice for the big guy touchdown, not just a cool thing to get, these weekly awards, but a very important thing for the outcome of that game.
ASU's defense continues to just score touchdowns, 3 already in 2 games. So, Joe, how many FBS teams that have played 2 games so far this season have the Sun Devils scored more touchdowns, or Sun Devil defense scored more touchdowns than
just their whole team?
Yeah, the entire, or their offense, yeah.
Okay, I'll say
there's like 135 teams, I think, this year with Kennesaw coming. Close, 7.
Dang, that was a random guess. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Any notable name? Do you have the names? Is there any like?
There's a couple. The one that's most hilarious to me is that they're equal to Florida State's offensive output.
Oh my goodness! Wow. Yeah.
The preseason number 10 team in the country.
Yeah, Florida State's in a rough way.
And one last bit of news before we dive into our review. We're getting to this part of the season where these kickoff times are coming down, and man, a little bit of a sea change here now that the Sun Devils are in the Big 12. September game that's kicking off at 12:30 local time. Arizona State's trip to Lubbock to face Texas Tech in a couple of weeks will be kicking off 12:30 p.m. here in Arizona. If you're heading out there or in the Central Time Zone, 2:30 local.
Man, I mean, it can't get much better than that, especially if it's a road game, one that you could obviously watch in the comfort of your home when weather's not really an issue or something like that. Again, if you're not making the trip, then I love everything about that. I'm not saying just to like get it done, but it's a nice thing to just have it be an early part of your day because, hey, if it's a W, it sets you up for just a nice remaining Saturday versus just what we've encountered for years and years and decades of 7:30, kickoffs, even if you're just watching it at home or out at a, establishment of adult beverages or something like that and being out in that environment until 10, 11 o'clock. Hey, if you can get it done in the afternoon, not a bad thing. And before we talk about the game that was ASU's victory over Mississippi State, to get all the best input outside of what Brad and I do, of course, in addition to complement one another. If you're a Sun Devil follower, Sun Devil fanatic, you got to be on DevilsDigest.com. Of course, being a subscriber of DevilsDigest.com not only gets you access to the content on that site, not only gets you access to the Devil's Huddle message board, a wonderful community, also gets you premium content access across the Rivals Network. So if you want to learn about other teams, ones ASU may be playing, or others that you just might have a general interest in, want to follow recruiting, whatever the case may be. Obviously, they do content on football, basketball, some other sports as well. There's no bad time. There's no reason not to be a subscriber to Rivals, and of course, specifically on DevilsDigest.com. As you know, Hode Rubino, our great friend, joins us very, very often, has just a insurmountable lead on the lifetime appearances that no one will ever come close to matching or exceeding. So we're obviously grateful for that, grateful for the support from DevilsDigest.com, and we hope that you can become a subscriber there. Great community, and whether things are going great or not great, there's always a lot to talk about. So it is a wonderful time right now to be a member of DevilsDigest.com.
And a lot to talk about here about ASU's 30-23 win over Mississippi State. And, well, I mean, I guess it's kind of fitting because it's ASU. it just what didn't happen easy. It didn't. I mean, even though with the big lead, it always always something university. But I think this is a big sign of growth that we saw a team really face that adversity that has struck this program the last few years, and they've succumbed to it so many times, but they were able to kind of take the punches and then throw some counter punches. That's something Kenny really hammered home in the post-game press conference. Unfortunately, it seems like a lot of the crowd wasn't able to see them hold on for dear life in that very clutch drive to close out and burn that clock. But I think that we have a team that was able to not just get their first ever SEC win, but the manner in which they did it and able to just impose their will, dominate the trenches, and then also get a very hard but also successful lesson in handling adversity. I think this is a night that we might look back upon as kind of an inflection point or one of those key moments in the Kenny Dillingham rebuild.
Yeah, it's like when you step away from it and exhale and you're happy that the game ended up in a W and didn't go completely sideways. You can certainly see benefit. You see the forest for the trees and understand that in these early games you want to find different things that you can work on as the season goes on. And this is certainly a slew of items that this coaching staff can focus on this week and beyond. And I think that can be very fitting, especially for this upcoming game at Texas State, which we've talked about. A lot of folks are talking about, circling it many, many times over in the preseason discussions, as this has, whether you want to call it a trap game, whether you want to call it just a game that has the potential to be much more challenging than maybe you would think in other contexts, or if you don't know a lot about college football down to the depths of the G5 teams, you may not think that Texas State is that great of a program. They've only been at the FBS level for a little over a decade. You can throw all that out the window because this game right here has a lot on the line. And so to have this sort of adversity in this contest against Mississippi State and to have survived that and punched and counter-punched and taken one on the chin and just punched right back and closed it out when you needed to, that's a very, very good thing.
All right, so we got to dive in, start with the star of the show, Cam Skattebo. The night belonged to him. 262 yards on the ground, second highest total in program history, thanks to what Eno did to the Beavers a few years ago, 312 or so. But 297 total yards. He did everything. Cam led the team in receptions, receiving yards as well. That 297 total yards is the second most all-purpose yardage by a Sun Devil since Brandon Ayuk against Oregon State in 2019. And, of course, Ayuk had some special teams work in there as well. Just an absolute dominant showing. And just overall, 346 yards on the ground, Joe, is the most by the Devils since I didn't even realize it. But, again, Oregon State, they did some bad things, Oregon State, in the back half of that last decade.
And even the old, was it Benny Malone or Woody Green, whoever had the previous rushing record that stood for decades? That was against Oregon State too. And that was before even and that was before the Pac-10 days. That was like in the 70s, something like that. Yeah. So there was like this little thing. Yeah. And I mean, granted, as we know, Oregon State definitely got its shots at ASU over the years. So, a little payback there, I guess.
Yeah. So it was obviously a historic night for the Devils. Just getting it done on the ground, as we'll talk about in a second, but the pass game just wasn't there. But the night was Cam Skattebo's. He's been a guy that has been going through a lot, asked to do too much a season ago, but his number was called. And one thing that really kind of jumped out to me in hearing from after the game is, when they went out there early on in that game, Mississippi State was running with 3 down linemen, and he said that he and the rest of the offense felt disrespected, that they thought that the Bulldogs thought that they could stop the run game, and he just made him pay. And it was just consistent, like you said, Joe. There wasn't really a home run ball up in they had the 39-yarder at the end that he smartly slid to cap and secure the win. But overall, 15 runs by the Devils of 10+ yards on the night.
I cannot believe that Mississippi State stayed in that 3 down lineman formation for as long as they did. I think they've switched up a little bit in the second half, but I mean that's something that they got ran over. Like the game it's not necessarily put away, but kind of put away by virtue of that decision and their decision to stick with that longer than they should have. That's how ASU got such a large first half lead. So thanks for that, defensive staff for Mississippi State. But yeah, I mean, when it came down to it, they were figuring things out a little bit. Some of the runs were just not getting quite as much. And I think the teams started to get a little fatigued there. But ASU on defense, which we're not necessarily talking about right now. But when it came down to it, when you needed to get like those first downs, when you had like third and shorter, ASU's going for it on fourth down, these critical plays that in the grand scheme of things, yardage wise may not add up to much. You get what you need there. And then, like you mentioned, that 39-yarder at the end that he wisely stayed in and slid, and that put the game on ice. It was only fitting, for him to be the one that put that nail in the coffin, for it to be his longest, run of the game, for it to add up, to such a high level. And my goodness, I'm looking at this now, and I honestly didn't even catch this part until right now. He didn't lose a single yard the entire game.
Every week in the game notes that Jeremy Hawks puts together, like, he is historic throughout his career, is among the nation's best in terms of all Division I, in terms of not being stopped for a loss or no gain.
Yeah, I mean, that's unreal. And he had 33 carries. Like it's one thing if you only, obviously just the higher amount that you get, not even anything. Like, it's not the end of the world if you lose a yard. You know what I'm saying? Like, but the fact that there were zero, it's unreal what he's doing on the ground right now. And he needed it because, it was a little different look, especially from the rush offense, because the other running backs that were used, between DeCarlos Brooks, Kyson Brown, 29 yards on 10 carries between the two of them. I mean, helpful stuff, but just different than what we saw, in week one, where just everybody was running at like 5-6+ yards a carry. Sam Levitt had a great day on the ground as well, but you just can't say enough about Skattebo, and it is something, again, that statistically one of the absolute best performances in the history of the program.
Yeah, and I think it's really just the kind of the culmination of what we're seeing in terms of his transformation from a guy who did it all last year in a certain way, but that wasn't what this program and what Kenny Dillingham needed from him. Kenny said after the game that he told Cam point blank after the season that at this point he's not a pro back, and that's of course Cam's goal, that he needs to improve his speed, needs to get in better shape, needs to be stronger. And this is kind of an interesting, because Cam's a fiery guy, and Kenny wanted him to start to channel his emotions better into more productive ways. Now, fast forward to what we've seen through the offseason of the slimmed down, faster Skattebo that we saw in spring and fall camp, him being voted to the Pat Tillman Leadership Council by his peers, and of course rushing for 262 yards on an SEC defense. Kenny said, "Yeah, that's a Sunday player right now."
Yeah, so that's just he's just one of those guys that, man, I know that we were intrigued and excited when he transferred to ASU. Okay, this FCS guy did some great things. Wonder what we got here. And then obviously last year he did the do it all thing, and he's just at a different level. And you hope that he can maintain it. You hope that there's balance, and they have obviously the backs to create balance to where he doesn't have to have 35+ touches every single game. I mean, obviously he gets it done, but that just wears on you over the course of a football season. So, yeah, be very intriguing to see just how he's used this week and what they integrate there. But he's very much on the radar. But if folks didn't know who he was, if they're paying attention to anything, he's a known commodity right now, because after 2 games, when you have that kind of game, he's right up there, as far as the nation's leading rushers.
All right, so we've got to talk about that gut check drive when all the momentum was on Mississippi State side. They had cut that deficit dramatically to just a one-score game when ASU, it looked like they were just going to waltz to another victory. But, Joe, there was that decision that Kenny had. I believe they were still around their 32, 33-yard line in that final drive, clock ticking down, facing a 4th and 1 deep in their own territory, and they run it, and Cam picks it up, chains moving, obviously ultimately seals the drive. Would you have had the gall to go for it in that situation?
Yeah, because looking at it now, it was 4th and 1, ASU at their own 34.
Oh,
and it ended up being a 5-yard drive or 5-yard run rather for a first down. It obviously is a difficult call to make, but it's even in the moment, I support it, because just Mississippi State was doing everything that they wanted to do on offense for that little bit of time, more than a little bit of time, felt like a lot of time, but like that. After that long third quarter drive that took up more than half the period, through a good chunk of the fourth quarter, and especially that, was it just one play, that 80-yard touchdown that they had? The offensive, if you gave them the ball, you figured they're going to do, whatever they wanted to with it. So I figured that was worth it. I know that some might make the argument like, okay, well, why do you want to give them the ball in their own territory? But they just went 80 yards on one play. So you know what? Like, the whole field is their territory within that context. So I support it. I think at this point, you got to you can't play scared. You can't play not to lose. You got to take risks. And when you were doing it, like with Cam Skattebo having the game that he had and ASU's offensive line protecting as they did and blocking for him in the run game as a whole, it just comes down to the very basic fundamental aspect of, all right, you need 1 yard. And I think that it was even a short one, if I remember correctly. Just put it on the line and go get it. If you can't get it, then you've lost that play and you got to try to make it up. But that's football, man. And it went the Devil's way. And from there, that pretty much, I think that play eased a lot of people because that was, again, kind of controversial, gutsy call, but it worked out.
Yeah, last year, some of Kenny's fourth down calls might have been reckless, and obviously maybe just looking for a spark, given that all the entire quarterback room and offensive line room was injured and all the adversity and everything. But that one felt like the right call, just because, as you mentioned, the way Cam was running, the way that the run game had been going all night. But like you knew that Cam wasn't getting dropped for a loss. That he was going to find some manner to get that ball past the sticks and continue the drive. Also should mention before maybe look elsewhere that Kenny talked about the game hinged on kind of the end of the first half, ASU being able to get some points, dominate possession, but also that near 8-minute drive to start the second half, and that's 14 straight minutes of possession that ASU was able to get going, build up the lead that they needed every bit of to secure that win.
And let's not bury the lead here. Let's not forget about the momentum builder between the first and second quarters, the key to victory. I mean, come on now, folks. Hopefully y'all saw it, if not at the game on social media. Brad and I, we were very, very grateful, graciously invited to be a part of the Sun Devil fan story. That was, well, more than just a fan, of course, on my dad, Tim Healy. Awesome thing. So we were involved in that. Huge shout out to the folks at True Story Films. So they were real awesome with us. We had a great time here in the studio as they were recording last week. We kept a little under wraps just to keep the mystery alive, and I think that production turned out outstanding. And I was selfishly, because Mississippi State had the ball, I'm like, don't score at the end of the first quarter. Like, I don't want people like getting mad or leaving and going grabbing a beer, going to the bathroom. I'm like, we need some momentum. And they didn't, so I'm like, yeah, there we go. But that was a cool thing to see, to be up there on the big screen. You know what? Even though we're here in year 27 or whatever it is that we're doing here, it's still cool to have these new experiences. So, again, you know what? Every little bit counts when it comes to momentum in these ball games.
All right, so let's talk to an area that did not have great momentum from week 1 to week 2, and that's the passing game. Now, Kenny Dillingham did say that he really kind of puts the blame on himself, that he handcuffed offensive coordinator Marcus Arroyo, that he really kind of just fell in love with the success of the ground game. And that, for a young quarterback, that really is kind of, had an adverse effect in terms of not getting Sam Levitt in a rhythm. You mentioned earlier, though, Levitt did have a great game on the ground, 2 rushing scores, 68 yards. Now, he keeps making some great plays with his feet, but just 10 of 20 throwing on the night, 69 yards. Now, there was a number of deep shots over the first couple weeks, actually, that just are almost there. That those are plays that we see in practice that are getting completed. So Kenny feels confident that those deep shots are going to come, but thankfully the Devils, the run game was working well enough. They didn't need to have much out of the passing game. I mean, your wide receivers had 5 catches for 30 yards. Tight ends had a pair for 3 yards. Of course, as you mentioned, Cam led the team with 3 catches for 35. But yeah, you just, for a young quarterback, it's good that Kenny realizes this and the need for balance. But it was just, I saw some Sun Devil fans were a little frustrated during the game and after. Even though there was the win, that they think that the passing struggles to this point, and granted, it's again still week 2, that it might not necessarily be a red flag, but maybe, I don't know, little pink, orange flag,
something like that. Yeah. As you mentioned, like those deep balls. You're hopeful and confident that will come around, because there have been a couple missed long touchdowns that could have been the case in each of the first 2 games, obviously including this past weekend. There's some touch aspects, some things that we do have to kind of come back to earth and remind ourselves that this guy is only in his second collegiate start. That was the case this past weekend, which I think was probably only his 5th or 6th career college game. And what he played at Michigan State last year, nowhere near the magnitude as far as the pressure of the moments. So there are some aspects that are still coming around to things, because if you even break the numbers down further, there were a 21-yard completion to Skattebo, a 13-yard completion to Xavier Guillory. So if you take that out, and that's 2 of the 10 completions, it's 8 completions for about 35 yards. So there's a lot of like single-digit stuff, very small yardage stuff. So that's definitely going to have to improve. And the opportunities, are going to be there. Now, of course, it's a major benefit that ASU was running the ball as it did, not just from the running back position, but Levitt as well. So a lot easier to, digest lessons after a win versus a loss. If the somewhat unthinkable would have happened, and if ASU would have just blown that, 27-point lead into a loss, that would be a difficult thing, of course, on many different levels, and it would have largely, if not completely, fallen on the shoulders of Sam Levitt because he's the quarterback. So again, you take those lessons, you see how they'll be applied, because even though Mississippi State had a lot of question marks, though they were picked to be next to last in their conference, it's still an SEC team. It still has SEC size and speed. It's players, especially on defense, that they brought in from a variety of different programs or youngsters that came up through the ranks with their program. So it's, again, even though ASU was having its way with the Mississippi State defense for the first half of the third quarter as well, still a lot of talent there. So we'll see how this rebounds this week. I think, this week and next as well, because Texas Tech has not done much on defense to stop many people. These next 2 games, they're remaining contests before you get to that bye week, before you get to the month of October, I think are going to, really tell us a lot where this pass game is and what this offense is going to be around. And what the offense is going to be about. Is it just going to be run with a little dose of pass, or are they going to even things out a little bit?
It's a good position to be in when you have to work on that passing game, fine-tune it, and kind of get what you see in the practices into the games when you're absolutely dominating the line of scrimmage, both sides of the run game. So here are some numbers through these first 2 games. Arizona State has rushed for 587 yards and 5.5 yards per carry. That, by the way, that 587 yards is 44% of last year's total through 16% of the schedule. Pretty good.
Not a math major, but yeah, that's good.
Conversely, opponents have rushed for 64 yards on the Devils, averaging 1.1 yards per carry. You'll take that every day. That's a good ratio for victory.
Yeah, and Mississippi State averaged 0.9 yards a carry, so that's like what, 2.5 feet, something like that. I don't know. And Blake Shapen, the quarterback, he was their leading rusher, and he's a mobile quarterback. Mm-hmm. Has been through his career. Had 40 some odd yards in the first game to lead the team. Finished with a net of -22 because ASU got in there and sacked him, I believe, 4 times if I'm not mistaken. 4 times. So when you have that, and it's not just sack yardage balancing it out. I mean, their top ball carrier Kevon Lee had 9 carries for 35 yards. That's under 4 yards a carry. That's not you'll take that just about every game, So what ASU's been able to do, just limiting these rushing attacks over these first 2 games. And again, we're still just learning every week because Wyoming suffered a pretty bad loss. Mississippi State, we'll see what they're about, but you keep doing this. This early schedule just has it's like a 50-50, challenge, but also opportunity. That's the case coming up at Texas State, then Texas Tech the next week. So you're seeing these opportunities where if ASU can just keep this going, you can really build some momentum. You got to take it week by week, one at a time, like the late, great Bruce Snyder told us. But, man, especially on defense, you have to be very, very encouraged because it wasn't just a deal where it was like an impressive performance in game 1 against an inferior team and things come back to earth. Like you're seeing a trend. So we'll see how that trend, if it does, continue.
All right, so let's switch over to the defense. I think, a great 42 minutes of the game and not so great 18 minutes there in the second half. Now, we should say this is a defensive side of the ball that's missing a lot of key pieces. Prince Dorbaugh was still out. Jordan Crook, who was looking like he would be opening the season opening the season with the first team defense, he's out. Tate Romney's going to be out for a few weeks. Defensive tackle Jeff Clark, he's out. And kind of a surprise scratch, cornerback LaTerrence Welch, he's also out. Positive flip side there is Kenny Dillingham thinks that all these guys are kind of beginning to be returning to the lineup, over the next couple weeks. Some this week, some the week after Texas Tech. He says all for sure by the bye week. Still, though, that 18 minutes was nearly the difference in terms of, after holding this Mississippi State up-tempo attack in check early on, giving up a 12-play scoring drive, an 8-play scoring drive, then a 1-play 80-yard scoring drive. Not great for a defense that we've seen pretty much dominant throughout most of the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is, I think, just a little bit of fatigue because once Mississippi State was able to get some momentum going and move the chains a little bit, I mean, that's hard to keep up with. They operated very, very quickly, and they've got talent. So I think there's, partially just Mississippi State kind of finding its place. You got a guy like Kevin Coleman. I mean, that dude is a burner. You got to remember, he was like a high 4-star recruit, did the whole Jackson State thing, following Deion Sanders. But, I mean, that guy was an elite recruit coming out of high school. So that 80-yard touchdown that he had, I mean, that was something that's what he can do. I mean, there is talent on this roster on offense. Blake Shapen is a solid quarterback, a ton of experience. So, there's no, shame per se in Mississippi State getting a little bit of something on offense. But yeah, just the fact that it was condensed into that sequence to where it was, starting to become predictable. And there were a lot of people that were like, all right, when it got down to a 1-score game, you're like, all right, I've heard this song before.
Yeah.
I've seen this movie before. That's why obviously those drives by ASU at the end were just so critical. So again, it just gives you some valuable talking points. We'll have to see how this offensive scheme for Mississippi State sizes up to others that ASU will see, because I mean we've seen it from teams like Oregon or others in the past. It does get a little unnerving. I mean, I'm not this level of an X's and O's guru of defensive backs playing off to a pretty extensive amount to where when you operate offensively with that speed, you can just complete passes pretty easily. So yeah, there was that stretch of time where everything seemed to unravel almost, but it didn't.
Kind of a best case scenario where you get kind of slapped out of maybe some complacency, and Lee Fatano even said, it's human nature. You get run up to a big lead. So, but you learn a valuable lesson, and you also get the W. So it's kind of checks a couple of boxes. So maybe from a coaching perspective, but still overall, despite that 18 minutes where things got a little squirrely, and there was that that I don't know, questionable 4th down holding penalty on Keyshawn Elliott. Overall, the Devils had 9 penalties, 85 yards, much higher than their opening night performance. But overall, on aggregate, they had held them to 292 yards. So the Bulldogs gained less than Skattebo did individually. As you mentioned, 4 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, and a defensive touchdown. That's still a pretty good night when you're holding a pretty talented offensive unit to 23 points.
Yeah, and then as you mentioned, you've got the 80 yards on that one play. I mean, who knows what would happen if it's an incompletion? Do they still go down and score? Who knows? But yeah, if you look at the whole picture of things, take the 30,000-foot view, and maybe not necessarily focus on how tense things got there in the 3rd and 4th quarters. It's still a very, very good performance. But as we mentioned, I think it's something you can really put a silver lining on it, because it's ASU, right? So if ASU would have won that game 37-3, it would have been pretty concerning entering this week's game. The whole trap thing, I think, would be really heightened a little bit. So that might be revisionist history. It might be, rose-colored glasses, looking back, hindsight being 2020, whatever cliche you want to throw out there. But again, I think that you see these little things that I think that are good. Like last week, you had that bad Monday, Tuesday, the early week practice that Kenny Dillingham was very critical of. But so you take that and you shift things and you make it better. With this, you take the aspects that led to that slide in the second half, and you use that as a way to create something better. Time will only tell what that actually adds up to. Will you see ASU come out and be focused and disciplined and effective for all 4 quarters and use that toward a win here, or is it going to be indicative of something larger? So we're choosing to take the positive, optimistic approach and thinking that, okay, the things that happen in this game can be resolved, or that maybe ASU won't be seeing that level of offensive skill talent, because again, Mississippi State reloaded. It was a very different offense this year from last year. So they brought in some key players. So we will see how it pans out, but when you get a win with this team, I believe it's only the second time in the last 5 years ASU started 2-0. I mean, these are the things that used to be real normal for ASU to go 3-0 in the non-conference and then work things out from there. I haven't even seen 2-0 or 2-1 in a while. So be happy with that, but also be mindful that there's room for improvement.
All right, so as we close out, we got to give some props to the special teams unit. Now, this is something that I questioned last week. We saw some uneven performances in some areas that perhaps could use some improvement from week 1 to week 2, and to their credit, that's what they did. Ian Hershey came out there and nailed all 3 of his kicks, including 2 from 47 yards. So that was good to see after last week missing one from, I believe, 38 yards. This is a team that's not going to have a ton of margin for the rest of their schedule. So to have a special teams unit, a kicker that they can count on, will be huge going forward. And Parker Lewis, 7 for 7 on touchbacks, just a thunderous leg. And as we'll talk about, Texas State's got a couple of dangerous return men as well. So if you have a guy that can consistently kick that ball in or out of the back of the end zone, that's a big boost.
Yeah, and talk about Ian Hershey, it's more like a retrospect kind of thing, because when he was kicking the ball, at the times that he did, it was ASU was either in the process of or already had built up a big lead. That final kick was that long drive of the third quarter, and I remember just talking to people, like at that point, with the lead that ASU had and the time they took off the clock, I remember saying, honestly, if you would have missed that, I wouldn't have been too broken up about it, because they took the amount of time they took off the clock was almost worth points in itself. But as things unfolded, literally after that third quarter drive, then it adds up and say, my goodness, it's a dang good thing that he made those 40-plus yarders, because it would have either been just the narrowest of margins had he missed both, or, if he had a really bad day, it could have gone a different direction. So after that first week and a lot of questions about the place kicking, that was a good, very, very good game. It was a perfect game. You can't get any better than that, than what he did out there. And with ASU's special teams, and with still trying to define this team and figure out what the true strengths and concerning weaknesses might be, and what special teams did last year and those inconsistencies, when you have just one single game and you can take it in that nutshell and say, all right, that is really good. That's really impressive. And if you can get just consistency from the kicking game, like we've talked about, I have no doubt that probably multiple games over the course of the season will come down to special teams either way. And so if that kind of performance can be repeated, that could add up to wins down the road for ASU.
So I think all together, you're sitting at 2-0 if you're the Sun Devils. Far from perfect, a lot of things to work on, but really just kind of a best of both worlds situation where you kind of identified what you need to work on. You still have some things to kind of developing, some chemistry building. You got some, especially on the defensive side of the ball, some reinforcements on the way, but things just feel better when you're 2-0.
There you go. Yeah, and it's something that you just can't take that lightly. This team has won 3 games each the last 2 seasons, and they're 2/3 of the way from meeting that amount. And if that can continue, then you really we're getting to that point where if they keep winning, whether it's this week and next, or maybe one of the two, then you kind of start stepping back. If you get to that bye week 3-1, or most especially 4-0, and I know we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Then you start to kind of reassess, reevaluate, your preseason expectations. Because I had 5-7. Did we both go 5-7?
We both had 5-7, so it might be.
That'd be a good problem to have, and we'll cross that bridge if and when we get to it. But again, winning is very good, and it's okay to have some areas to work on and still get a win out of it. That means that you're doing obviously more good than bad. Really eager to see how ASU comes out this week and their level of focus and execution, counting on it being at a high level, because there's been enough for this team to focus on these first 2 weeks to say, all right, there's no reason to get inside your heads or to get a big head about this. There's talent here, and this could be a season that exceeds expectations, but you have to get it done, and you have to refine and fix some things to even come anywhere close to that outcome.
All right, so that puts a pin in the look at the win over Mississippi State. So, Joe, I think it's a good time to maybe start, taking a look ahead to a rare mid-season Thursday battle.
And before we jump behind enemy lines, this one goes out to all the homies. If you're looking for some fire food from a restaurant owned and operated by diehard Sun Devils, make Burrito Express your local burrito joint. BE is a family-owned business that began in 1995 with a combination of authentic recipes, competitive prices, and a comfortable atmosphere. That all makes dining with Burrito Express a unique experience. You've definitely seen their passion on Twitter. You've seen how incredibly active they are supporting Sun Devil student athletes with a multitude of NIL deals over the last few years. Safe to say, if you're part of the Sun Devil family, and if you're listening, you dang sure are, Burrito Express is a business well worth your support. And by the way, the food is top tier all the way. They've got 7 Valley locations, 2 in Gilbert, 1 in Mesa, 1 in Chandler, 1 in Scottsdale, a Tempe location near Kyrene and Elliott, and that ASU location near Rural and University, just about a half mile from Mountain America Stadium. They're open 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday, while some locations are open as early as 6 a.m. during the week and 8 to 3 on Saturdays and Sundays. So we talked about that day game coming up here in a couple weeks against Texas Tech. Load up on some BE before you get to watching that ball game. You can order online at theburritoexpress.com for pickup or delivery. Be sure to give them a follow on Twitter and Instagram at BurritoEXP and on TikTok at BurritoExpressAZ.
All right, joining the program now for this week's Know Your Enemy segment is Bobcat insider and host of Win Now or Get Bent, Keff Ciardello. Keff, thanks for joining the program. How are you today?
Hey, I appreciate being here. I'm doing awesome. You know, the Bobcats are fresh off a win, but they've got a big opponent coming up, and it seems like it's going to be another big crowd. So it should be a lot of fun this Thursday. All
right, so let's dive into it, but maybe a little beforehand, kind of set the stage for some of the ASU fans who might not be too familiar with the success the Bobcats have had recently. Of course, G.J. Kinney has had a tremendous job as head coach, taking over prior to last season, 10-5 overall, 2-0 start to this year. What is it about him that's enabled him to really make such an immediate impact on this program?
Yeah, I mean, if I won't go back way too far, but for a long time, this program was in a really bad way. From about 2015 to 2022, they couldn't win more than 4 games in a season. It was 8 seasons of just subpar play, and then there were a lot of changes, administrative changes, new president, new AD, a lot of things happened. And part of those changes was G.J. Kinney was brought in after the 2022 season. Jake Spavital was let go. And he came in and talked the talk right off the bat, was saying he's going to go out and get a bunch of transfers. He's going to get a lot of fan support. They're going to win games, put up points. He said a lot of things that other coaches who had come in had said before and didn't pull through with it. But he was a man of his word, specifically on the transfer portal trail, you know, a school, a G5 program like Texas State. If you really want to get some of those players to amplify your profile, you got to go find some of these players who weren't getting playing time at P4 programs or who are looking to elevate at an FCS program coming back to the state of Texas. That's what they use a lot of that Take Back Texas, hashtag Take Back Texas, all that stuff. They say a lot of that was started as a recruiting deal, trying to get players to come back to Texas. Like say they had left Texas and gone somewhere out of state, and bringing them back. And he was harping that he was going to do a lot of that, and he ended up doing a lot of that, and it completely flipped this team around last season. 8-5, it seems modest to most programs, but as I was saying, that's twice as many wins as their best season in 8 years. So it was a big deal for this program. It was their first bowl win for Texas State, and it just felt like the winds of change have blown ever since then. And it's carried over to this season, beating UTSA last week. That's a program that's 54 miles down the road from Texas State, about the same size, and a G5 program, just a different conference. They had beaten the Bobcats 5 times over the last 12 years. So to get that win was really big for this program. Even going back last year, the first P4 win over Baylor, that was really big for Texas State. And it's you can feel it this year. There's a lot of hype going into the year, and so far they've lived up to it. But they've got a real big opponent coming up on a short week.
Kenny Dillingham just wrapped his press conference a few minutes ago, and was really heaping praise on Texas State and the job that Kenny's been able to do out there. Calling them a team that could definitely hold its own in the Big 12. Talking about just this year so far, these first couple weeks, a win over Lamar to open, and then, of course, you mentioned the big win over UTSA, not just on the scoreboard, but, of course, as you mentioned, some of those things that win represented. What are some of your main takeaways, maybe with some positive, negative, or even the unanswered still, that you were able to take from those 2 games?
Yeah, well, the main takeaway for me is that their defensive line is very deep. It seemed like it was a really good defensive line last year. They were pretty close to leading the nation in TFLs. They were either 1 or 2. They were right up there in TFLs. There were a lot of penalties and a lot of big pass plays would happen. You go after the pass rush and you have man coverage, so a lot of those big pass plays would happen on this defense. But it's a defense that's very much focused on the pass rush and getting this defensive line. They were able to bring back most of a strong pass rush last year and even add players to it, like Tunmise Adelaide from Michigan State, Lange from Houston. They were able to get some other really big defensive linemen and just make it so they'll go 3-4 deep even on this defensive line. They're constantly cycling players out, and it does leave a little vulnerability on the back end of the defense. Definitely, there's still some big plays that happened in the passing game against opponents, but they've been really getting after it on the defensive side of the ball. On offense, I feel like it surprises a lot of people how much they run, because they are a very fast-paced offense and they like to stretch the field, but they run the ball a lot, and they used, I think, 5 running backs last week. That's something that GJ Kinney loves to do. He's from the Gus Malzahn coaching tree. He played under him. And Gus Malzahn loves to use running backs, 5 to 7 running backs he says he likes to use. And, GJ Kinney, he's shooting for that. He doesn't want to have one bell cow, even though they have Ishmati, who's a really good running back. They still want to use that stable of running backs. If there was a negative, I was saying it was probably on the back end of the defense at safety. They've been they had some injuries last week, which was already a bad situation because that's an area they didn't have a ton of depth due to injuries. So now they're even shorter at that part. So they are a little weak there than I anticipated. But, there was a lot of hype coming into this team going into the season. So a lot of the positional at every position, you felt pretty good about it. But the one thing about it was this program hasn't lived up to any type of expectation over the last decade. So is all this hype, is it going to be too much? Is the pressure going to break them a little bit? And I feel like that UTSA game was a really big test for that, because there was a lot of emotion going into that. But even with that, you got to watch out for like a hangover game for this Thursday, especially with such a quick turnover for this team, because it was such a big win. So that'll be something that'll be interesting to see the mental fortitude of this team coming off of that big win, how they perform on Thursday.
Now, going back a little bit to this offseason, seemed a bit of a quarterback carousel at times with Jayden de Laura, a name very familiar to Arizona State fans from his time at the U of A, announcing his commitment there. That kind of seemed like it prompted TJ Finley, last year's successful starter, to go elsewhere, and then, of course, ultimately landing on a very good player in Jordan McLeod, another former Wildcat, as it were. So what was that kind of like maybe that span of time with just not sure how the quarterback situation might have shaken out?
Yeah, we were just talking about the transfer portal and GJ Kinney and how much he liked it, specifically at quarterbacks. I mean, before last season, he got 2 big transfer quarterbacks in, got Malik Hornsby to come in from Arkansas, and then he got TJ Finley to come in from Auburn. So there was a quarterback battle there. TJ Finley sets the passing record for Texas State, single season passing record. So it seemed like, it's a foregone conclusion. Of course, that's going to be their guy going into next year. But the coaching staff that had other plans, they went after Jayden de Laura. As soon as he committed, TJ Finley decided he's going to leave, goes to Western Kentucky. But then some revelations come out about a lawsuit with Jayden de Laura concerning a sexual assault case from when he was a juvenile. And there was a settlement in that whole case, and that came out, and there was even like a planned protest from the students here at Texas State. So they quickly backtracked on the Jayden de Laura situation. He withdrew from Texas State, but it's too late. TJ Finley was already gone, so Bobcats were looking, what are we going to do for quarterback? And, GJ Kinney, he hammers that transfer portal. He does what he does, and he was able to get Jordan McLeod, the reigning Sun Belt Player of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year last year at JMU, got him to transfer in conference to Texas State. I mean, Texas State already had the top scoring offense in the Sun Belt last season, and then they added the Sun Belt Offensive Player of the Year in Jordan McLeod. So they have a pretty high-powered offense, and they saw it last week with McLeod. I feel like he really demonstrated that those dual threat abilities more so than he did in that Lamar game. He was able to get 2 rushing touchdowns, not a ton of yards, but anytime he did take off, you saw he's a pretty dynamic player. So, I mean, just combining that with this offense is pretty crazy. But, yeah, they got really lucky after that whole Jayden de Laura situation to land Jordan McLeod. I mean, that was a player. He entered the transfer portal when Kurt Signetti left for Indiana over at JMU. It seemed like, okay, that player, he's going to be somebody who's going to go to a P4. It seemed he was going to go to a bigger school probably. I didn't expect him to stay in the G5, let alone the Sun Belt, but then he ends up at Texas State. It's pretty remarkable. I mean, he's one of 4 players last year who threw for 3,500 yards and 35 touchdowns. And the other 3 players are Jaden Daniels, who won the Heisman, Michael Penix, who did really well at Washington, and then Bo Nix. I mean, all 3 of those players went in the top 12 last year, and then the 4th one on that list is Jordan McLeod. So he can put up the numbers. He's a really good player. He risks it. He's done that, and then against Lamar and UTSA, he's thrown a pick where he's trying to do a little bit too much. This one against UTSA, it kind of bounced off the receiver's hand, so that's not fully on him, but he does get a little risky, and so that could be something the Sun Devils could take an opportunity on.
And of course, he has the luxury of having one of the nation's premier all-purpose players, and Ish Mahdi back there, over 1,300 yards rushing, great out of the backfield. Seems he also is a pretty dangerous return man as well. What makes him so special, and how does this coaching staff like to utilize his abilities?
Gosh, Ish Mahdi, he really is a do-it-all running back. I mean, he even catches passes out of the backfield. There was a time last year where he broke his hand, and he had one of those club casts on his hand, and he still caught a couple passes out of the backfield with one hand, like catching the ball with the club. It was pretty cool stuff. He's a real interesting player. He came in last year. It was a pretty crowded running back room. He was coming in from Houston Christian, not the biggest school, going up against some pretty big transfers, and for him to emerge out of that group the same way he emerges out of a crowded line of scrimmage on some of these runs. He's a terrific player. He's got all the intangibles as far as speed. He's got the vision. He cuts back upfield on certain runs and keeps it going. He's not afraid to get physical despite not being a very big player. He can handle a big workload, or he can be kind of that change of pace player off the bench. I mean, against Lamar, he had 28 carries and was real effective. This last game, he only had 9 carries and was still pretty effective, had some catches, did some stuff in kick return. He's all over the place, and they're going to utilize him in multiple different ways because, as I was saying earlier, they like to use a lot of running backs. So he's not necessarily going to be like their bell cow back like he was in that Lamar game. It seemed like it was just the first game. Maybe they weren't trying to put a ton of film with some of these other running backs out for UTSA, but that is their identity, is using a lot of running backs. So they will do that, but they're going to find ways to put him out wide, and he'll go catch some passes and do all kinds of things. I mean, he's a real special player.
Now, as you mentioned, the success on the ground, I believe Lincoln Perry also is involved, had some good success coming off a big game as well. ASU, on the flip side, has been among the nation's best at stopping the run in this early season so far. How do you see that kind of matchup? What maybe any adjustments schematically that Texas State will make, or are they just going to kind of plow ahead with what they do?
I imagine that they do go game to game and change with their schematics. So I imagine they have some certain changes that they're going to make for ASU, but for the most part, they're going to try to unleash their stable of backs, even if it is a tough front seven that they may or may not be able to get over on as easy as some of these other opponents. I mean, it's a P4 team, as you just said, one of the top run stoppers in the country, but I would imagine they would try to unload a lot of these running backs. They have some bigger ones like Torrance Burgess as a UTEP transfer. He's a bigger back, and Deion Hankins as well. They get more like these third down type backs instead of these scat backs. Like you have Jalen Jenkins. He's a lot more like Ish Mahdi, where they can catch passes and is more of a speedster. They have a different variety of running backs that I'm sure they're gonna try and put on Arizona State, but it's definitely going to be a tough task, no doubt about it, trying to run the ball on this team.
Who are some of the pass catchers, whether at the wide receiver or you mentioned the running backs, of course, but also the tight end position that ASU's defense is going to have to account for?
Yeah, the top one in that is Joey Hobart. He was their leading receiver last season. He had a big game against Lamar. That first game, I mean, last week was the kind of the breakout game for Chris Don Jr., who's a redshirt freshman. He had 150 yards on 5 catches, about 30 yards a catch. So he's a pretty terrific player. Their starting group of receivers, they're not very big. They're all under 6 feet, but they're all really fast and really sure-handed. The other two in that is Jaden Williams and Cole Wilson. And we talked about the kick returning game with Ish Mahdi. Cole Wilson, he also had a 100-yard kickoff return last year. So they actually have 2 really good kickoff return players that are out there, and one of them's out there at receiver. They haven't shown a ton from the depth, a ton behind those starters, but those 4 guys, they're really good. It's almost like they have 4 slot receivers across the whole board right now with those starters. It's kind of interesting. They don't go a ton to the tight end, maybe like 2 to 3 targets a game, but Connor Fox is a pretty solid tight end. He's a Kansas State transfer, local guy around this area from San Antonio. So they won't use him a whole lot, but if they do end up throwing to a tight end, it's going to be Connor Fox, number 9 out there.
Now flipping over to the defensive side, you mentioned that this is a group that likes to kind of get after, make some plays in the backfield. Overall, what should ASU fans expect to see from a schematic standpoint from the Bobcat D?
Yeah, I mean, they love to. They're multiple, like most defenses in college football are these days, but they love that 4-2-5 man. That's really what they do, and they really like to let those 4D linemen get after it. They'll send some blitzes, but for the most part, they're trying to get a good push from that defensive line. That man coverage, it comes with a lot of risks and a lot of rewards, and we've seen some of those risks, as I was saying earlier, some big plays, not a ton of interceptions, when you're not playing zone and having guys kind of sitting in an area instead they're on a specific player. There's not as many turnovers as you would expect. But for the most part, it's a live and die with the pass rush type of defense. Even when it comes to the run, they've done a really good job against the run. They have a big task in SkatteBOOMED this week, though. Absolutely. That which is a player that is pretty familiar to GJ Kinney. I don't mean to get off topic, but this one's kind of interesting. GJ Kinney, he knows Cam Skattebo from Sac State. When GJ Kinney was the head coach at Incarnate Word the year before he went to Texas State, he played against Sac State in the FCS playoffs. Saw Cam Skattebo do his thing, and when he came to Texas State, he was trying real hard to get him to be a Bobcat, but he ended up being a Sun Devil. So very familiar with Cam Skattebo here, and they know what he's about. They're gonna have a real tall task going up against this one, because that offensive line for Arizona State against Mississippi State, that is a big P4 offensive line. It's a much different deal than they've been going up against. I mean, they're ready for it, as ready as they've ever been, but it's still, at the same time, it's just it's a different talent level, no doubt.
So some guys like Brian Holloway, Sean Holt combined for nearly 200 tackles a season ago, they're gone. And so how have the Bobcats been able to kind of reload that defense, and who are some of the key names on that defensive side of the ball that ASU's got to watch out for?
Yeah, they lost those players, but their best defensive player they got back in Ben Bell, number 33, coming off the edge. I mean, he's a player. He'll be playing on Sundays next year. He's a force off the edge, no doubt about it. And they've even been doing some fun things with putting him in coverage sometimes, which has been real interesting. He's a pretty big guy getting out there in coverage. So that's their number one guy to watch on defense, and obviously a strong defensive line. Players all across the board there, but going kind of on the back end of the defense. You mentioned Brian Holloway leaving. I mean, that was a team captain. That was a huge player for this team. And so in the middle of the defense, it's usually just two linebackers, as I was saying, that 4-2-5. Sometimes you'll see a weak side linebacker with 3 down and 3 back. But they had those two, that 2 spot in the defense, in the middle of that defense. That's a pretty important part to this 4-2-5 defense, and right now they're still trying to figure out who's going to fit in there. They have Max Harris, who's a transfer from ULM. They have a returner named Kenny Haynes. They have some other players, Manny Nunnery from Houston, and they're still trying to cycle through and figure that out. So if that's another area of the defense that they're still figuring out, it's right there in the middle. After it was so strong last year, you mentioned Brian Holloway and another player named Dan Foster. Those were the 2 starters there. Dan Foster transferred to Louisville. So they're figuring it out on that part. And then at safety, they're a little banged up with just don't have a ton of depth at safety. Pretty strong at corner with Josh Eaton and Chris Mills. Those were their starters last year. Both of them I believe, are in their 6th year. Chris Mills may even be in his 7th year. So there's some guys who have a ton of experience, have both been starters for a little while. There's a few holes in the back end of the defense, but that front 7 is a pretty ferocious bunch.
So we're going to do a little role play here and put you in the shoes of ASU OC Marcus Arroyo. What kind of game plan are you drawing up to attack this Bobcat defense?
Gosh, I mean, when you got Cam Skattebo, I mean, you gotta kind of ride him for sure. But I mean, but like I was saying, there is some opportunity over the top of this defense. You got to trust your offensive line in some spots, because this offensive line seems really good to me. I mean, you guys watch them more than me, I'm sure, but that seems like a pretty good offensive line, and trusting them and to give your quarterback enough time to go a little deeper and get to that second, third level of the defense, I think is going to be key. If you try to do things within 5 yards, they seem to be all over it. Even quick little pass plays, they just have players all over it. But deep, they can get beat. They can get beat deep. That's for sure.
So obviously, there's going to be some Sun Devil fans making the trip out there to San Marcos. So what kind of environment? How hostile of a place is that going to be for Thursday night when that place gets rocking a little bit?
The student section gets a little wild. I will say Texas State is a school that looks up to Arizona State as far as party schools are concerned. That's one of Texas State's heroes. But aside from that, the rest of the crowd, I mean, it's Texas, so it's pretty friendly people. It's got some of that Southern charm to it. But it's not too hostile. Definitely not. I mean, the student section, they might be imbibing a little bit, and they're right up against the opponent's sideline, so they'll be giving it to the players and all of that. But I mean, walk around the tailgate. It's a pretty wild tailgate. Some would say the best G5 tailgate in Texas. By some, I would mean me. That's me for sure. It's a pretty good one. It's a good environment. Even if you're wearing Arizona State colors, they'll have a nice drink for you. They'll have some food for you. So just walk around, find a tent, find a grill, just start talking college ball, and they'll be good to you. I promise.
So how is it for the folks on the field, for the players? Because I believe some UTSA folks were saying that it was just really raucous and really environment that really had an impact on the game.
Yeah, it is. It is. That student section, they do get pretty rowdy, and that's been a good development over the last few years as this program has tried to turn it around. That's been something that they've focused on, is getting students into the game and having a lot of these initiatives to get them in there so that they'll show up, especially because they were there for a sellout. A sellout for Texas State, it's only 28,000. But they had a sellout against UTSA, and that student section was full, and they saw a big win against their rival. So I imagine they'll be back for this Thursday game. It's on ESPN. That's pretty rare for Texas State and San Marcos, a game on ESPN, a P4 opponent coming to San Marcos. I mean, I don't think that's happened in 10 years. I should have looked that up before I got on here, but it's been a while since a P4 has been to San Marcos. So I imagine they'll be pretty rowdy. They'll be giving it to Arizona State, but Arizona State, they're a Big 12 team. I know new in the Big 12, but a P4 team. So they're used to those crowds. I don't think that'll affect them as much as it does some of these G5 programs or these FCS programs like Lamar. It's not as effective, but they're a little infamous. There were some issues last year, specifically with a trident against Nevada. Nevada has a trident, and it got taken by the student section. They were passing it around. So Arizona State may want to secure the trident. I'm sure they have one around. You gotta watch it. Don't let anybody take it. In fact, the Texas State band member took the trident, gave it to the student section. That band member was reprimanded for their actions. So just got to keep your head on a swivel for some of them. I mean, sometimes they get on the sideline and they try to get a little crazy.
So as you mentioned, last year, they took down Baylor. So a P4 win is nothing new to this program, at least in the direction it's going. What would a win on Thursday mean? Where would it rank in terms of the key wins of this program, and what kind of impact would a win have on the trajectory of the program under Kinney? Gosh,
it would be huge for this program, mainly for college football playoff implications. I mean, it's a far-fetched dream to be the 1G5 that probably gets one of those 12 spots, but you have to be undefeated for it. So if you lose this week, it may take you out of the race for that. And I know that's something that's important for a lot of G5 programs. But it would be massive. It would be right up there with that Baylor win if the Bobcats were able to pull it off. I mean, that was the first game of the game last year, and it turned out Baylor wasn't that good. They went on to have a pretty subpar season. It seems Arizona State is a strong opponent. This is somebody that's really going to offer a true challenge. And if they were able to get over this hump and get that win, it would be massive. It would keep. I mean, we saw a sellout on Saturday. If there's another one on Thursday and the Bobcats pull off an upset, it could be more sellouts going through the season. And that's been when it was those dark times, as I was talking about earlier, 2015 to 2022, those 8 years, nowhere near a sellout. There are some times where you look out, there's 2,000 people at that game. So to the way it's turned around has been great financially just for this program. Not just for the morale, but just for them building up funds and everything. And so if they're able to sustain that for a whole year and put together, they have 7 home games this year. If they can get a good chunk of those with close to that 28,000, that's just going to do a lot for this program, because that really matters on the G5 level. It is, obviously the main difference is the TV deals. Difference between like $7 million a year for being in Sun Belt and 30, 40, 50 million a year for being in Big 12 and conferences like that. So you really need, whenever you can take advantage of these sellouts, these big crowds, you have to do it. That's why it's so great to get a P4 into San Marcos. A few years ago it would have been like, hey, it's just nice that y'all are even here. It's okay if the Bobcats lose, but I can tell you this time it's a different deal. They definitely want to win this one. They've always wanted to win it, but they feel like they can win it this time.
So Sun Devil fans are certainly hoping to fill their bellies with some Cam Skattebo and the running game and a big win coming up. But when you can do that every day of the week is at Spaghetti Shack, which you certainly know by now is not just owned and operated by Sun Devils, but a former Sparky the Sun Devil. The Spaghetti Shack is a community-focused to-go pasta concept started right here in Tempe, Arizona by 5 lifelong friends. They serve a menu starring spaghetti, meatballs, garlic bread, and a few other fan favorites. They make it their mission to provide quality, affordable food as quickly as possible so you can spend less time cooking and spend more time with your loved ones watching Sun Devil football. They offer a variety of Italian-American options for you to choose from, whether you want to pick one of their delicious options or build your own shack by choosing the amount of pasta, type of sauce, and protein. They have options for anybody and any family. They've got 2 locations, one in Tempe at 6340 South Rural Road, which is near the intersection of Rural and Guadalupe, and open every day from 11 to 9. And for those up north, they have a Pinetop Lakeside location at 592 West White Mountain Boulevard, open daily from 11 to 8. You can follow them on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at The Spaghetti Shack and on Twitter at Spaghetti_Shack. So, Brad, we turn the page now to Game 3, ASU's first road trip of the 2024 season. As we mentioned earlier and have it multiple times over the course of the time we've spent previewing the season, this is one that's always been circled as you want to call it a trap game, you want to call it just a game that you can't overlook. However you want to describe it, nothing has changed, in these first weeks of the season. It's only been emphasized week after week. Texas State is a solid ball club. They're playing some very good football under head coach G.J. Kinney, which we'll talk all about. This is one that ASU cannot take lightly whatsoever. This is going to be a very important game for the Sun Devils.
Yeah, this is a game I thought would never happen. This is a legacy of Todd Graham's Texas-focused scheduling from about 9-10 years ago. It always struck me as odd on the future schedule of ASU going to Texas State. Now, fast forward to the present day, this is a good team. Kenny Dillingham was raving at his Monday press conference, saying this is a P4 quality team. This is a team that could hold its own in the Big 12 conference. And, I mean, you have a team that had the best season in program history, dominated Rice in a bowl game, returned 17 starters, had maybe an upgrade at quarterback, and it's just coming off beating down a really good and pretty solid UTSA team, and kind of got one of those monkey off the back type of wins. So they're riding high. It's going to be a blackout atmosphere in San Marcos, Texas. A lot. Yeah, I mean, we talked about it a lot. It is the stereotypical dictionary definition of a trap game, so ASU cannot overlook this one.
And the Devils are looking to sweep their non-conference play for the first time since 2019, and if they were to do that, it would only be the third time in the past 10 years. So again, a lot on the line here. It's the first ever meeting between these two programs, which isn't a Texas State has only been at the FBS level since 2012. It's just these non-power conference games, especially on the road. These aren't the gimmies that maybe they once were or were perceived to be, because what else is on the line here is ASU is looking to not have a 3-year streak of losing regular season games to a team from outside the power conferences. Of course, last year losing to Fresno State, the year before losing to Eastern Michigan. Now, those are two very solid programs in their own right, but when you're playing a G5 team, or I don't know, like is a G6, what does the Pac-2 count as these days? Whatever it is you refer it to, you got to win these games. You can't take it lightly, but these are essentially, I guess you could call them must-win types of games. As you mentioned, Brad, Texas State is coming off their best season as an FBS program, 8-5, first bowl appearance and bowl victory in program history last year. Head coach G.J. Kinney came from Incarnate Word, some distant ASU connections of the past because he played his college ball at Tulsa. Who was his head coach there? That would, of course, be Todd Graham. Only the second winning season in program history was their 8-5 finish last year. That included an opening game victory over Baylor, which was, I'm sure, a huge accomplishment for this program. And ultimately, as you mentioned, they got that bowl victory over Rice. 2-0 this year, started with a 34-27 win over Lamar. That one was maybe Lamar came back quite a bit at the end, so it was a little bit more distant, maybe kind of comparable in nature to ASU's win over Mississippi State, but they still got the win. 49-10, lopsided victory in what I believe is a rivalry game over UTSA.
Battle of I-35 or something
There
like that.
you go, exactly. So, this game up ahead against ASU is the only Power Conference regular season opponent that Texas State will have. Against those types of opponents, again, Power Conference teams, however you want to, word that sort of thing. Since coming up to the FBS level in 2012, Texas State is 1-11, with that only win being that game in Waco last year, a 42-31 win over the Bears. So this is one of those teams that just isn't afraid to go toe-to-toe with Power Conference teams.
A nice battle of young head coaches that have tremendous offensive pedigrees. So that, what Kenny's been able to do in San Marcos since he got there is certainly very impressive. Probably putting himself on the radar for some other programs that might be jumping on the coaching carousel here this cycle off season. And but yeah, this is definitely going to be a real tough test for the Sun Devils. Obviously, all the hallmarks of a trap game as we alluded to, but this is a chance that kind of one of those key moments before ASU dives into Pac Big 12 play. So in these back-to-back weeks of Texas, obviously the Texas to Tempe connection's been such a focus. Kenny was wearing a ASU Texas shirt today at the presser. I mean, you got to make a statement. You don't want your first trip out there, given the strong focus that this program's had on that state and the recruiting territories, to kind of lay an egg there and lose on national television. It's, of course, another ESPN broadcast now, and I believe it's the only one being broadcast on Thursday night. So yeah, the nation's college football eyes will be on San Marcos, Texas, on ASU, on Texas State, the two quality teams that are going to be battling it out.
So we're going to have to use a lot of enunciation here because you've got their head coach last name Kinney, and you've got ASU's head coach first name Kenny. So I don't know what that means, but I just thought about it. So taking a look at this team and the personnel. Yeah, you talked about that quarterback upgrade. You heard about it in our Know Your Enemy segment. Just a wild situation that occurred in the early part of this calendar year with Jaden DeLora leaving Arizona and for a hot minute becoming a member of the Texas State program, which prompted the departure of TJ Finley, their record-setting quarterback from last year. Obviously, DeLora did not stay with the program. That created an opening, and they went and got Jordan McLeod, the reigning Sunbelt Conference Player of the Year, to transfer from James Madison. Of course, James Madison's head coach, left for greener pastures as well. So the book on McLeod, one of those college football journeymen, his fourth school in 5 years. He spent the 2019 and 20 seasons at USF before transferring to Arizona for 2021 and 22. He only played in 3 games with 2 starts for the Wildcats there, and then he left and starred at James Madison last season, throwing for over 3,600 yards, 35 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. He ran for 276 yards and 8 scores. Again, Sun Belt Conference Player of the Year and naturally a first-team all-conference pick. Last year, he had 5 300-yard passing games, including a high of 457 against UConn. He had 3 games with at least 60 net rushing yards, including 104 against Georgia State. To start 2024, he had 238 passing yards with 3 touchdowns and a pick against Lamar, 309 yards with 2 scores and a pick last week against UTSA. He has 39 net rushing yards on the season and 2 rushing scores a week ago. So this is a guy that, especially in what he did once he really got a shot last year, James Madison, one of the elite quarterbacks, one of the elite offensive players at the G5 level, that makes you one of the better, more productive quarterbacks in college football. So this is a major challenge. To date, no disrespect to Blake Shapen and Evan Svoboda, but the best quarterback ASU will have faced in these first 3 games and probably one of the better ones that they'll face throughout the whole season.
Yeah, this is going to be a real stiff challenge. It's probably good that they faced a guy like Blake Shapen last week, in terms of a guy that can make plays with his feet. And so this defense has to stay pretty disciplined and not let McLeod get out there, because he's a guy that can hurt you both ways. And as one of those guys who's been around since the last decade in this sport, I mean, he's not going to get rattled. He's a veteran presence. He's seen a lot of stuff, and when you have an offense that G.J. Kinney has been able to put together, and the success that the Bobcats have had over the last year plus. I mean, this is it's not often you're able to get your conference's reigning player of the year and just kind of put him into your offense and have an upgrade there. And this is going to be a real stiff challenge. That ASU's defense has played pretty well, other than that 18 minutes last week. But overall, they've got a good defense, but this is going to be a stiff challenge.
And the Bobcat offense, pretty balanced. They run the ball very, very well. They've got a duo that they like to use, Ismail Mahdi and Lincoln Pear. They combine for over 150 yards per game through the first 2 games of the season. Starting off with Mahdi, he transferred in from Houston Christian prior to last season. Leads the team this year with 182 yards on 37 carries with the touchdown, adding 5 receptions for 56 yards. Monster year last year. First team All Sunbelt Conference as an all-purpose player in 2023. 1,331 rushing yards, 10 touchdowns, 20 receptions for 275 yards and a score. Very good on returns as well. One of 2 guys for the team that had a 100-yard kickoff return for a touchdown a year ago. So he is someone that can hurt you in a number of ways, and he combines with Lincoln Pear, who averages 7.8 yards per carry this year, 133 yards on 17 carries with 2 scores. He began his career at Arkansas State in 2020 and 21. Transferred to Texas State. He was their leading rusher in 2022 with 772 yards, but he missed last season due to injury. So this is an experienced and accomplished pair. Obviously, the ASU rush defense has been its hallmark and right now stands as one of the absolute elite run defenses in the country. But this team, between their running backs and quarterback, if we're focusing specifically on the rushing portion of their offense, they can get it done.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to see Perry back from that injury, and then Mahdi, putting up those monster numbers. He's a smaller back, but very explosive. And you mentioned what he's able to do on special teams as well. So Parker Lewis's leg is going to be important in that regard. But ASU has so far had one of the best rush defenses in the country. Stiff challenge here, and of course, as they get into Big 12 conference play, there's a ton of really talented backs. Of course, 1 week after Texas Tech's got a really good one, and a number of other ones. So this is going to be a good test of that run defense to see if this hot start is just perhaps a product of playing some bad teams or some bad rushing offenses, or if maybe this run defense has actually got some legs to it.
And in the past game, Texas State has a few receivers that they like to use and ones that were pretty accomplished last year. Chris Don Jr. leads the team with 163 yards on 7 catches. It's a very impressive 23.3 yards per catch average. Ties for the team high of 2 touchdown catches. He shares that with Joey Hobart, who had a great year last year. He leads Texas State this season with 10 receptions for 143 total receiving yards. He was a second-team All-Conference honors recipient last year, 76 receptions for 895 yards and 8 touchdowns. Jaden Williams has 8 catches for 84 yards this year with a touchdown. Cole Wilson also has 8 catches for 83 yards. Wilson was an honorable mention All-Sun Belt Conference pick last year. He had 66 receptions for 747 yards and 8 touchdowns. Williams came to Texas State this offseason from Boston College, where he had 42 receptions in 28 games across the 2021 to 23 seasons. So, variety of options. Again, some accomplished running backs and guys that are highly capable in that regard, but it's not a one-dimensional team that you can only focus on the run, because between the competence and ability and experience of the quarterback there with McLeod and a variety of pass catchers that he can use who've done it at the college level, again, you can't just hone in on one thing and hope to stop that and win the game.
Yeah, as you heard Keff Ciardello talk about, that this is kind of a group that is like maybe 4 slot receivers in that starting lineup, though. No guys that are really true huge physical specimens, but a lot of explosiveness, a lot of guys that can make big plays and reel off real game-changing type of momentum in a hurry. Hobart, is coming in back as the number 1, but what Chris Don was able to do a week ago with 150 yards receiving, he's a big play threat, just a 5'7" guy. But ASU's corners were under some focus last week. I was really in particular thinking they were going to have kind of sway the difference, given that Jeff Lebby passing attack. Another stiff test for him this week. We'll see if LaTerrence Welch is able to get back in there and get in that 2 deep again, and it's going to be tough. These are very explosive playmakers. You have a veteran quarterback and also a run game to keep you honest as well.
Yeah, you can't have consistent repeats of that 80-yard touchdown by Coleman where he just caught it and blazed down the sideline for a touchdown. As you mentioned, these Texas State receivers, not big in stature. There's a lot of like 5'7", 5'8", 5'10" guys, 170-pounders, but that's all you need sometimes to be very, very effective. So when ASU's on defense, there are going to be a lot of weapons that Texas State has at its disposal, but you also expect ASU to have, a talent advantage across the board, or at least, cumulatively speaking, defense compared to offense. But that will be a test. It's going to be, strength versus strength there with ASU's defense against the Bobcat offense. Flipping things over to the Texas State defense. Now, they lost their top 2 tacklers from a year ago, a pair that combined for about 200 tackles. Ben Bell returns. He is their star-studded defender as far as all-conference honors from the past. This year so far, he's got 4 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, 3 quarterback hurries. Last year, he was second-team All-Sun Belt, 16 TFLs, 10 sacks from his edge position. This season, defensive back Jordan Polk leads the team with 18 tackles. They got a guy by the name of Ryan Nolan, but when you look on the stat sheet and it's backward, it's Nolan Ryan, which is
Texas.
My second favorite professional athlete of all time, my favorite baseball player of all time. The reason I'm a Texas Rangers fan. He's got 10 tackles so far this season. So if you're looking back last year, because when you're at these early points, I think when you're still in non-conference play, I kind of like mix what did they do last year with what they're doing this year. And I know that in this era of college football where there are a lot of different players on teams, you can kind of throw some of the stuff from the previous year out, but it also helps. So last season, Texas State allowed nearly 33 points per game. That's something that's, intriguing. Allowed over 150 rushing yards per game with 26 rushing touchdowns allowed, along with 24 passing touchdowns and about 245 passing yards per game that were allowed last year. So some opportunities there. In Game 1 against FCS opponent Lamar, the Bobcats held an 18-0 halftime lead, but they were outscored in the second half by a margin of 27-16. That game proved to be a one-score win. In that game, Lamar quarterback Robert Coleman threw for 237 yards and 2 touchdowns, while Lamar's 2 top rushers combined for 88 yards on 20 carries, 4.4-yard average. I bring that stuff up because I kind of looked at that last week with Mississippi State, and they blew out Eastern Kentucky in the opener. But I was looking at this like, all right, their top 2 running backs for Eastern Kentucky ran for about 4.5 yards a carry and, well over 100 yards. Like, this could be an area of opportunity for ASU. Kind of thought that to myself. I wish I would have said it a lot louder because of the way that ASU was able to run the ball. So we'll see how that goes. Now, last week for the defense for Texas State, when they were playing UTSA, the two Roadrunner quarterbacks that were used combined for 252 passing yards with 1 touchdown and 1 interception, while UTSA's top 2 backs combined for 50 rushing yards on 14 carries, 3.5 yards or so per carry. So what I'm saying here is the defense has some experience. They've got some playmakers. But between last year and a little bit of what's been seen this year, even though they're 2-0, there are some areas that I think you can get excited about, especially with ASU's bread and butter being on the ground.
Yeah, so this is a defense that likes to run out of a 4-2-5 base, and very similar to ASU, and also similar to ASU in terms of ASU's approach with DC Brian Ward. This is a group that likes to be very aggressive, and they were among the nation's elite teams in terms of making tackles for loss and making plays behind the line of scrimmage a season ago. And Kenny said it today that there's going to be a lot of blitzing, a lot of pressure that's going to be coming at the Arizona State line and Sam Leavitt. Now, we've talked about some concerns on the offensive tackles for the Sun Devils, and so this is going to be a stern test. You mentioned Ben Bell, one of the best edge guys in the group of 5, group of 6 as well, and they're just really kind of deep and good, athletic up front with the defensive line, similar to ASU. I think their strength is also along the line as well, but it's going to be an aggressive defense. On the flip side, that means there's going to be some opportunities downfield, and we talked about some of the struggles last week in the past game. The game that ASU really didn't need to take those shots. I don't think that's going to be the case this year. I think with the defense and what the Bobcat defense likes to do from a schematic perspective, ASU is going to need to start connecting on those shots down the field.
And also, in addition to that, just give me some more of that Kyson Brown screen action like week 1. That could be an area where ASU can really take advantage if G.J. Kinney, he doesn't necessarily come from like the Todd Graham coaching tree, but he comes from that in the essence of having been coached by Todd Graham. So maybe there is that blitz everything aspect that just, happens when you're involved in that sort of thing. So in this game, I think you also got to mention the special teams. Certainly could come down to that aspect of the game for both teams, but Mason Shipley, the kicker for Texas State, was a perfect 15 out of 15 last year. First team all Sun Belt. 2 out of 3 this year. And as we mentioned a year ago, Texas State had 2 players, each with a 100-yard kickoff return for a touchdown, and they're back. Ismail Mahdi and Cole Wilson, both featured players in the offense as well. So what we're saying here is if this game gets close, or if there will be momentum swinging plays, Texas State on special teams has shown the ability to be, consistent and capable, and also have those big plays as well.
Yeah, we'll see if ASU is able to have a repeat of last week. It's just the little things. Making sure the dangerous return men don't get a chance to have a run back, or your punt coverage team's able to get down there and be able to flip field position if needed, and perhaps most crucially, make the field goals when you got the opportunity. Because as we'll get to here probably in a minute, I think we see a close game ahead.
So before Brad and I jump into the keys and our scoreboard prediction, while many ASU stores have come and gone, Cactus Sports is a community staple, founded, owned, and operated by ASU alumni since 1992. Every purchase made through Cactus Sports results in royalties that help support Arizona State University. Many of Cactus Sports' competitors have been bought out and operated by out-of-state corporations, but Cactus Sports stays locally owned and operated. They consider it a privilege to be able to work together with their guests, alumni, fans, and students who help give input for some of the products Cactus Sports buys. When you purchase from Cactus Sports, not only are you assured of the highest quality officially licensed merchandise, but you also have the satisfaction of knowing that you've truly helped support local small businesses. Cactus Sports is located at 514 South Mill Avenue in Tempe, open 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and Sundays from 10 to 6. You can also view their full inventory and shop online at cactusports.com with free domestic ground shipping for orders of $75 or more. They also feature items such as the Iron Devils line and Activate the Valley line that includes a donation from every purchase to ASU's Sun Angel NIL Collective. And also, of course, they're a retail partner of another sponsor of ours, Home Field Apparel. Locally owned and ASU alumni operated since 1992. Shop at Cactus Sports and think local, buy local, be local. All right, Brad, go ahead and kick it off. What is key number 1 for you?
Just keep on keeping on with the run game. I think that the advantage here is threefold. Obviously, 1, you're gaining yards, and ideally you're scoring points and wearing down that defense. I also think that it's going to be able to control the game tempo. Last week against Mississippi State, that Jeff Lebby offense liked to go, go, go. But it's hard for an offense to go if they're on the sideline, and ASU was able to really dominate time of possession in that game, and ultimately I think it was a critical factor in getting that win. This is a Bobcat offense. It's talked about very explosive, also likes to go with some tempo. It also, I think that run game will help to neutralize the Bobcat pass rush. Ben Bell and company are very adept at getting behind the line of scrimmage and making plays. It's going to be a stiff test for the ASU offensive line, but they've shown that they are some pretty darn good run blockers so far this year. So those 3 things, I think, if ASU doesn't, I don't think they need another 400-yard or pushing 400-yard type of effort, but if they're able to continue to have success in the trenches, I think there's going to be multiple benefits for the Devils.
So my first key is related, but different enough to discuss and not just say, yep. So it's basically ride the hot hand, but stay balanced. So what that means is, you don't necessarily have to give Cam Skattebo 50 touches because he had this monster game. But you also don't have to go all Mike Norvell and say, all right, well, Skattebo had a great game last week, so they're going to be expecting that. So let's do the exact opposite for this ball game. Don't do that either. So ride that hot hand. Get Skattebo the carries. Get the run game going, as much as possible. Make them stop you. Like, we've expected ASU to be very good on the ground this year. They've proven to be that so far through 2 games. And so make teams stop you. But you also want to stay balanced. Of course, you want to lighten the load a little bit, get other running backs involved, get the passing game integrated into it, be strategic, be smart with that. If they're being ultra aggressive against that, okay, use the screens and things like that to your advantage. Play to your strengths. Get the confidence going in Sam Leavitt in the pass game. But again, you don't necessarily have to just go that direction to try to fix it. Don't air it out from the very beginning just to try to get confidence in the pass game and just to try to get that aspect of the offense, rolling heavier than it has been the last 2 games. You can keep it fairly simple, I think, and just ride that hot hand. But again, don't overdo it. Don't underdo it. Just be logical.
Key number 2 for me is to unleash hell with the defensive line. Texas State's offensive line they've had some struggles in pass protection dating back to last season. Now, they do return 3 starters, but I think this is an area, given ASU's play and depth up front, with Clayton Smith having a strong start to the year. Elijah O'Neal, 2 sacks so far. We saw what CJ Fight has been able to do in the middle. Jacob Kingaika has been a real force in there, even though it's not necessarily shown up in the stat sheet. This ASU defensive line is deep and very talented. I think they have an advantage there, and I'd like to see Brian Ward really play to that strength. And if those guys can really kind of step up, that could have a multifaceted benefit for the Devils.
Again, my second one's going to be related. It's keep forcing mistakes when you're on defense. This team, again, it's just a small sample of 2 games, but a night and day difference as far as generating turnovers and productive turnovers compared to last year. We talked about just that dry spell that ASU had. So if you keep that going, and McLeod, he's been good for a pick a game through these 2 games. So that can be done. And ASU, again, has been able to find its opportunistic spots to create turnovers, whether, of course, that's fumble recoveries or interceptions. You keep that going, that's going to be crucial for ASU. It's not a huge facility there in San Marcos, but I'm sure they're going to be fired up. So you want to get that aspect going. You want to get we've heard about McLeod. He takes some risks, which can pay off, but also that, again, it's high risk, high reward. So you want to have that risk be the reward for ASU.
All right, final key for me is going back to the passing game. Talked about it earlier. ASU's got to connect on like a couple shots, 2-3 deep shots downfield. I think not necessarily maybe scoring touchdowns, although that'd be ideal, but enough to really make that defense not load the box against and try to stop that ground game. Sam Levitt's got to show that he's able to parlay what he does in practice into a game day situation. Jordan Tyson, Jake Smith, Xavier Gilley, these are guys with the speed and the ability to get open downfield and have been open downfield. Just they haven't been able to connect with Levitt on those deep shots. I think they need to get a couple of them, maybe 1 or 2 early to kind of get that momentum, keep that defensive honest throughout the course of the game to get that balance that I think where ASU will finally be optimized.
My last one is something that ASU has been doing and they need to continue to do, get a strong start. By my math, I believe Texas State scored 53 first half points, which is a largely disproportionate amount compared to what they've done in the second half. They let things almost slip away in the opener against Lamar. So they've been, again, starting off strong, and that makes sense for a game like this coming up where it's a ton of momentum on the side of Texas State. It is at home. It arguably, if they were to win, would be, if not the biggest win in program history, somewhere in the top 3, I would say, along with Baylor in the bowl game last year, all things considered, or again, on the very short list of most significant wins. And I'm not saying that from a position of arrogance, because we know ASU has struggled the last 2 years. This is just a program that's only been at the FBS level for a little over a decade, and they just haven't had that much time or massive success. So even though ASU struggled the last 2 years, this is still like a major, major thing for Texas State to be playing this game. So you want to get ASU to take the crowd out of it early, to do the thing that's been done these first 2 games of getting either a stop or a turnover on possession 1 for the opposition, and then scoring on the first opportunity you touch the ball, whether it's a defensive touchdown or a drive like ASU had. I mean, they've been perfect opening sequences for ASU these first 2 games. Obviously, the first 2 halves, ASU has just completely obliterated these first 2 opponents to the point of really fracturing and almost breaking them. I mean, though Mississippi State made the run it did in the second half last week, they got like a ticky-tack, like frustrated penalty at the end of the first half. Like, it looked like ASU was just breaking them apart emotionally, some emotional damage, as was the case against Wyoming. So that would be huge. Again, a game like this, you just don't want them going toe-to-toe or having a lead in the early standing, because that's when things can get weird. If ASU can go out there and take like a double-digit first-quarter lead, not saying they can coast. We learned that from last week, but that would obviously do huge things.
All right, time for the predictions. I'll start things off. I think it's going to be a tough matchup for ASU. There's going to be an atmosphere that's going to be really frenetic. It's the blackout, ESPN. Everybody in that campus is fired up and ready to go. Also, there's like playoff implications in this game. I mean, of course, with the G5 representative, Texas State is kind of entered the year as maybe one of those kind of dark horse G5 picks to make a run at the postseason. Of course, they got to stay undefeated and win the conference. And to stay undefeated, that means they got to beat ASU. I think they're going to come out really fired up. I don't think we're going to see the level of dominance right off the bat from ASU that we see in the first couple of weeks. I think but I do think that what we saw from ASU last week in terms of getting hit, being able to punch back, is going to come in real handy. I think that Texas State might come out there and get a lead, maybe like a 10-3 type of lead, get some momentum going on. But I think these 2024 Sun Devils are a lot different than the 2023 Sun Devil group, and especially any of the Herm era teams. I think this is a team that is going to play with some resilience and some grit in a hostile atmosphere. They obviously have the talent advantage, but obviously talent can only take you so far. But I think that this is going to be a game that's going to be real nerve-wracking for Sun Devil fans. It's going to be going back and forth throughout. Ultimately, though, I think the defense settles in, finds a groove, and the run game ultimately just kind of wears down that Bobcat defense. And I think ASU will be able to overcome a significant other off-field unrelated curse, which I'm sure you'll touch upon in your prediction, Joe. ASU 27-24.
I think this game is just going to be weird. I think it's going to be, is Sun Belt After Dark a thing there in San Marcos, Texas? I think this is like a survival mode game because just all the factors add up to that. I mean, we've seen multiple occurrences to the point that it almost becomes like a knee-jerk reaction of, and it is the battered fan syndrome. It's the Always Something University. It's all the different monikers that ASU has, and by virtue of that, the fan base has to embrace of, 2018, beat Michigan State at home, rousing victory, go on the road, lose a really frustrating game at San Diego State. Next year, go on the road, beat Michigan State in a thriller, come back and lose to a really bad Colorado team. So we've seen this, and I'm not necessarily saying that Mississippi State win is on par with those nationally ranked opponents like Michigan State, but we've seen this where you get a solid victory, momentum seems to be there, you think you got things figured out, you think you know what the team's all about, and then it just comes crashing back down to earth. We've seen that, but this is an opportunity to correct that, and as you mentioned, this is an opportunity after nearly 17 years, people. This curse that plagues me in my life needs to end. It has to end. It's been going on since the late stages of the 2007 season. Now, I don't make a lot of road trips, partly because of this, quite frankly. But I personally haven't seen a road victory in any ASU sport since the UCLA game in 2007, and I will be there in San Marcos, Texas. So I am hoping and praying that the curse ends this week, and I'm predicting that it does narrowly, heart-pounding fashion. The one where you just wipe your brow, you walk away, you exhale and say, thank goodness we got a W, and move along to the next one. ASU 34, Texas State 31.
So just a couple days away from a homecoming. How does it feel to be heading back to Texas?
Feel good just to be excited, just to go back home and play at home in front of my family. I'm probably gonna have a lot of friends there, family and friends there, so it's gonna be cool.
All right, so right now you guys are 2-0, obviously quite a difference than this point last year. What's the kind of the collective feel in that locker room right now? What's the mindset of this team?
Just being positive, just trying to get better every day and just be 1-0 every week.
So obviously you guys jumped out to a big lead, and Mississippi State made a little bit of a comeback there. Kenny talked about after the game that just how that lesson from that adversity, and how you guys were able to kind of counterpunch. Was it kind of a big lesson? How important do you think that's going to be for this team going forward?
It's good that we face adversity early in the season, just so we can know how it feels and just know how to respond to that. So I feel like that will help us. Like when things get bumpy down the season, we'll already have faced adversity, so we'll know how to respond to that.
What are some of the things when you look back at the film against the win over Mississippi State that you saw maybe that you guys could improve upon and learn from going forward?
Just communication, and then just playing fast and trusting each other. Everybody doing their 111 on the field, and just doing your job and trusting the guy next to you.
Looking ahead to this Thursday, what kind of things jump out to you about this Texas State offense?
They're explosive. They like to get the balls to their guys in space, so we're gonna have to come down, make tackles and stuff like that. It's gonna be a good game. They have good receivers, good players as well, so we're just gonna have to come out there and play and compete with them.
Seems like they like to use some tempo as well. How fitting was it that you guys face Mississippi State and dealing with that tempo, that's going to prepare you guys for Thursday.
I feel like Mississippi State, their tempo was it was fast, not gonna lie. So it was good to experience that early on. Just having them early games, to give you lessons that you can take and learn from in the season as the season goes on.
What do you feel are going to be the biggest, most crucial keys to get a defensive stop and a win in San Marcos?
Just playing sound, doing your 1-11, doing your job, just not busting any coverages, playing with good technique, scrappy and technical.
Keith, you guys going on the road now for the first time. What kind of challenges does that present opposed to playing here at home?
I don't really think it's just a challenge. I mean, probably just a crowd, but we practice with crowd noises, so I feel like we just got to come out there, be mentally focused, locked in, and just do our job. I feel like it would be a challenge.
I know you're from the state of Texas. What's that going to be like going home now to play, close to home?
Yeah, I'm excited to go home, play. I got a lot of family and friends coming out to this game, so it's going to be fun, coming and putting a show on for them.
Yeah, how would you describe football in Texas to maybe people that don't understand it from the outside?
Texas, high school football is the best state, most definitely. Nothing's topping Texas high school football. So the environments, all that, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a cool environment. And I'm glad the whole team get the experience.
I'm assuming you probably have maybe a little something to prove as well. Probably playing against some guys you maybe did play in high school. What do you think that's going to be like to see some familiar faces?
It's gonna be cool seeing the familiar faces, but at the end of the day, like we're on the field, it's no friends for real besides my teammates. So it's cool. It's gonna be fun though, seeing those guys.
Yeah, I know here at ASU too, you guys trying to kind of build the pipeline from Texas to here. What do you think it does? Not playing just this week, but also playing next week. What do you think that does to see some future Devils also maybe getting to see you guys play in Texas?
Yeah, it's gonna be cool. Just for the Texas kids, like the recruits, just to see that we have games in Texas now, so they get to come and watch us play. So when they come here, just know that their family can have them games closer in Texas to go to.
What do you thought about just your overall performance in the last couple of weeks, just first 2 games getting the start?
It's been smooth, could be better, but we're just gonna try to keep building, getting better every week, just growing as a person, a player, just keep growing and competing.
What do you think about the offense? Obviously, they've got Jordan McLeod, who was player of the year last year, and they got a pretty good running back over there. Kind of what have you seen in their game? They're good. Like we're gonna have to come out there, play hard, and physical. They play hard as well, so we're just gonna have to come out there and compete, just play our game, and we should come out on top.
2-0. What's the kind of collective mindset and the vibe of this team right now?
We're trending in the right direction. Everybody's playing their butts off out there. Just doing whatever the team needs us to do, as a collective, and just all overall, flying to the football.
In a game like Saturday, where the passing game isn't really relied upon, obviously you guys having so much success on the ground. What was that like from a receiver perspective? Knowing that you're not going to necessarily show up in the stat sheet a whole lot, but you guys are doing a lot to contribute to the win.
Just being unselfish, as a unit. Everybody's flying around blocking, stringing the block that can make a big run. So just being unselfish, most important thing. We just want to win.
How much of that Hines Ward imprint is really kind of taken hold on that group so far?
There's a lot. Everybody's trying to come out here and be professional. As we go on. Some games is not going to be our game. So the blocking game is where we're at right now. So we're just doing our best with that.
How gratifying was it just to kind of get that win? Obviously, showing getting up to the big lead, but being able to kind of rally and persevere through that adversity.
That was big time. We talked about it all week. It's a mindset. It's all about the team. So we're just coming out here every day and practicing hard. So it starts here.
What are some of the big lessons you're able to kind of take away from the first couple of weeks of the season?
Some of the lessons that I took from last game, coming out that second half, we can't lose focus. Most important thing, we have to stay level-headed, always go into halftime thinking it's 0-0 so we can come out, and play our butts off in the second half.
Looking ahead to Texas State's defense, a really aggressive group. What are some of the things that really jump out to you so far in your film study?
In the film study, they're very aggressive. They're big, athletic, so they're definitely, going to, give us a test. So, this is a big testament, this game. So we have to come out and be ready to play.
What kind of atmosphere are you expecting out there in San Marcos?
Expecting a sold-out crowd. Just like every game, that they have. It's a big game, so just coming out there to play.
Does it help facing this team after you face Mississippi State, who had a lot of big bodies, aggressive teams? Does that kind of help you guys prepare for this week?
Yes, most definitely. Mississippi State, big guys up front, and as far as the defensive backs, so same thing. They have big guys that can run, so we're gonna get tested.
They run a 4-2-5 defense, just like you guys run on defensively. Well, what are kind of some of the benefits of knowing that you've gone up against this defense now for months at a time and can really break it down?
It's great because we've been able to see different things that our defense does. That's very similar to what they do. So it's just taking what we learn and see in practice and watching them from film study and just being out there and being a football player.
they're really aggressive. They'll blitz a lot, especially in early down scenarios. How do you feel like maybe some of those blitzes from the secondary can open up things for the receivers?
Just being in the right place at the right time, being able to see the coverages when they get ready to blitz, knowing where you need to be in certain situations.
What are you seeing from the coverages just kind of stand out in film?
Some of the things that I see, just their defensive backs, how patient they are, and also how aggressive they are in the screen game. So, we're going to have to get after them.
When they're so patient like that, what are some of the things you have to do, maybe throw them off their game?
Just switching up your releases, doing different things, not doing the same thing continuously, because that's something that they can catch on from the tendencies that they do when they watch film. So just being able to switch it up.
All right, folks, before we send you on your way here, huge shout out to our great friends at Sun Devil Family Charities. Of course, they are a 501c3 nonprofit organization created primarily for the purpose of raising funds to provide financial assistance to Arizona State University alumni, students, staff, and immediate family members adversely affected by medical issues. Their SDFC Cares program allows qualified individuals to request financial assistance by completing an application and submitting verification of medical expenses, which are then evaluated by the SDFC Patient Services Committee. SDFC Cares is the flagship program through which Sun Devil Family Charities provides financial assistance to qualified applicants. Individuals and their immediate family members who have an affiliation with Arizona State University and are facing financial hardship due to a serious health or medical condition are encouraged to submit an application for assistance. Monetary donations are always appreciated and support those in need due to those unexpected medical conditions. They also have volunteer and sponsorship opportunities that are available, and those opportunities can all be found online at their website, sundevilfamily.org. You can follow them on facebook.com/sundevilfamilycharities and on Twitter at sundevil_family.
That's going to do it for this episode of Speak of the Devils. I'd like to thank all our great guests this week. This week's game will kick off Thursday at 4:30 p.m. Arizona time. If you're going to be out in Texas, 6:30 p.m. Central, television on ESPN. Make sure you support all our great sponsors and follow us on social media. You can follow the show on Twitter at SOTD Podcast, on Instagram at Speak of the Devils. Subscribe on YouTube. Our numbers there are really growing, so people are seeing us more.
You like to look at us, apparently. Yeah. So that it helps our self-confidence. It's not just our voices. Maybe you like our animated hand gestures, and I mean we are well-known stars of the big screen now.
Literal big screen.
We're gonna try to stay humble. Ain't gonna happen. So yeah, just consume all of us in any way that you possibly can is the recommendation.
Yeah, and make sure you follow me on social media at bdenny29.
And you can follow me at joehealy42.
All right, so make sure you support our amazing sponsors and give us a 5-star review on the podcast platform of your choice. Joe and I will be back next week as we look back at what happened in San Marcos and preview the opening game of Big 12 play when the Devils travel to Lubbock to face Texas Tech.